Hi everyone! Today's review is going to be special. And not just because it's about dwarf tomatoes. Of course, it's an amazing tomato line that you can't help but fall in love with. And I was actually preparing a big review in which I planned to tell you about dwarf varieties and my experience of growing them. But an unforeseen and pleasant thing happened in the process of preparation. In search of all the information needed, I have reached to the very origins and managed to get in touch with the person in Australia who founded this project. After all, no one can tell you about dwarf tomatoes better than the person who created this direction of tomato breeding. Honestly, when I sent a message asking for an interview, I did not even expect anyone to answer me at all, but I received an answer the same evening and got an agreement to do an interview from a tomato breeder from Australia, nuske-small. It was a big surprise and a great opportunity for me to learn everything I need to know about dwarf tomatoes. There is still no common opinion on how to grow these plants, when to sow seeds for seedlings, how to prune them, and much more. So in this interview, I tried to ask the questions that I, as a lover of growing tomatoes in general, and dwarf tomatoes in particular, would like to know the answers to. The only issue was to choose a convenient time for the conversation, as we have completely different time zones, but we were able to determine that when it's evening in Australia, it's morning in Europe, and the conversation took place. I would like to offer you an interview with nuske-small, a breeder from Australia, the creator of the Dwarf Tomato Project. Good evening, Patrina. I know it's evening now in Australia. And first of all, let me thank you for giving me such an amazing opportunity to make an interview with you as a founder of the Dwarf Tomato Project, so my viewers can know more about those wonderful tomatoes.
Hi Alex, I'm pleased to be able to talk to you about the project. Please go ahead and ask me some questions.
And the first question is, how did the tomato project appear, and why did you decide to pay attention to this particular area of tomato breeding?
In 2004 or around 2005, I started looking into doing some gardening as a hobby, and I was looking on the internet for some information, and I came across a forum that said it was all about tomatoes. And I thought, this is very strange. How can you have a whole forum about tomatoes? And soon I became very interested in all of the heirloom varieties. And I met Craig LaHollier on this tomato forum, and he was talking about the poor number of varieties of dwarf that were available. There were only a few, a very small fruited red type. And he thought we should breed some heirloom varieties with dwarf varieties so that we could have the same colours and flavours and options that you get in heirloom varieties, but get them on a smaller, more manageable plant.
Dwarf tomatoes are amazingly beautiful plants, and as I know that you stood at the origins of the creation of the very first of these varieties, could you describe your impressions when you first saw what dwarf tomato plants look like?
I saw them when I first grew seeds that Craig LaHollier sent to me, and I wasn't very experienced with growing anything before that, and when I saw how they compared to the heirloom varieties, I thought they were really very attractive little seedlings, and I still think that they're very attractive with their bigger leaves, and they're quite compact, and they have a darker foliage. They're very attractive.
There are thousands of different tomatoes bred all over the world. What do you think are the main advantages of dwarf tomatoes over other heirloom varieties?
One of the main advantages is definitely the size of the plants themselves, because they don't take up as much space. They are much more manageable. They only grow to sort of around a metre tall. And they are very sturdy and quite strong. They don't blow over very easily until they've got fruit. once they've got fruit, they do get quite heavy, and they definitely do need staking or cages or some other way of holding them upright, especially in windy conditions. I personally use cages to grow them, but I find them very, not only attractive, but they're very protective of getting the fruit sunburnt with their large leaves. Their foliage is incredible because it also allows the plant to photosynthesize and to put all its energy and all of its nutrition into the tomatoes themselves. And so you also get the benefit of really good flavour with these plants.
There is an opinion that dwarfs grow very slowly as seedlings. Is it really so, and when do you advise to start sowing these tomatoes for seedlings?
I haven't grown ordinary tall heirloom varieties for the last 15 years, so I can't really compare the difference between dwarf seedlings and heirloom varieties. So I can't really answer that question. I start sowing my seeds about 8 weeks before I intend to plant in the garden. For the first 4 weeks, they're in a very small little, what we call a punnet. There's 8 little cells in each punnet. After 4 weeks, I take them out of there and put them into larger pots for the next 4 weeks. And then I plant into the ground.
My viewers sometimes ask me, what's the better place to grow such varieties? Is it better to grow them in a greenhouse or outside? What would you say?
My preference would definitely be to be grown outside in the sunshine, if there's a choice. I have never grown in a greenhouse, so I can't compare. But basically, I think that nature has the best results, and so I would always prefer to grow in the ground out in the sunshine.
Despite sometimes not the highest growth, dwarf plants can be very prolific. Do you have your own way to get a good yield from dwarf tomatoes?
Generally, I let the plant do and grow whatever it wants to do, and I don't generally prune plants very much. Generally, also in this project, we recommend that you don't prune the suckers. I know that with heirloom varieties or varieties that grow very tall, often people only allow 1 or 2 stems to grow, but we suggest leaving the dwarfs to grow as many stems as they want, and you get the best productivity from the plant that way. However, I always do remove the first few suckers below the first flower truss when the plants are in the ground, because otherwise there's the possibility of splashing the plants when you water them, and you get dirt splashed up from the ground, and perhaps you can cause more diseases. But after that, I don't bother to prune anything until the end of season, and at the end of season, when I don't want any more fruit, I will then do some pruning of the flowers that are still trying to grow at that stage. But generally, just leave the plant to produce as much as it wants to, would be my recommendation.
Some people think that since dwarf tomatoes are bred in rather southern regions, for example in Australia or in the south of the United States, they will not grow well in more northern areas. Is this really so, and are there any varieties that can grow in not the most favorable climate?
It's an interesting question. Quite a few of the Dwarf Tomato Project plants are actually grown in Tasmania, and Tasmania is quite a cold climate. It has a fairly short summer season, but the people that grow them there, I know, start them early inside so that the seedlings are ready to plant out in spring as soon as the last frost is gone. And they produce very well there. And in fact, I think that you get a better result in the cooler climates than you do in hot climates. And certainly one of the worst things is not only heat, but humidity. In humid situations, the pollen doesn't spread very well. It clumps. And so the actual pollination of the fruit is quite poor. And in fact, this season here in Australia, on the eastern coast of Australia, it's been the worst tomato season that I've ever experienced because of a lot of humidity, constant rain, and in fact, I've only watered the plants once since I planted them in October. But my solution to this is to get an electric toothbrush and to use it to vibrate the flowers. And they do definitely pollinate much better in humid conditions. But really, generally speaking, I think tomatoes prefer cooler climates.
You've been growing tomatoes for years and have tried plenty of different varieties with different taste for sure. So can you tell me your maybe top 10 most delicious dwarf tomatoes?
I think I have so many favourites. This is really quite a difficult question. But the best ones that I really think I could not ever give up growing from the Dwarf Tomato Project would be Jade Beauty, which is a small green tomato that's ripe when it's ripe. Summertime Gold is just totally delicious. It's more of a beefsteak, larger fruited variety. Uluru Ochre is definitely one of my absolute favourites. It's so tender and juicy and really quite a complex flavour. Loxton Lass is my favourite orange tomato, and it's just delicious. Full of flavour, sort of sweet, tender, juicy. Definite favourite. That's orange. And for brown tomatoes, I really like Maralinga. It's also a beefsteak, which has got very rich, strong colouring inside. It's brownish on the outside. Also Tasmanian Chocolate. It's a very productive one and also a very tasty brown tomato. Rosella Purple is definitely another favourite. They say it tastes very similar to Cherokee Purple. I couldn't tell you because it's so long since I grew that one. I haven't grown Cherokee Purple for the last 15 years. Rosella Crimson is a pink one. That's very, very tasty. And also Coorong Pink is very productive, a bit smaller than, it's not really a beefsteak size. It's more of a round, medium-sized one. And the red tomatoes, I love Sweet Scarlet Dwarf is totally delicious, red one, and so is Tanunda Red. They would be most of my favourites. I think I've mentioned all of the ones I like.
You are a member of the Free the Seed, the open source seed initiative. Can you describe me what it actually is and what the goals of this movement are?
Yes, I came across the Open Source Seed Initiative on the internet, and I was very interested that they were contacting people who breed all sorts of vegetables and fruit, anything really, because the breeders were the ones that could give permission for their inventions to be actually protected by this initiative. So the goal is to make sure that there's always availability of these particular vegetables and so on, because companies such as Monsanto would very much like to take hold of these and actually make use of the genetic material, perhaps to then further use it for genetic modification and also to put, I forget what it is called, that you can do legally to prevent people from growing your plants and saving the seeds. I wish I could remember the word. Sorry. But anyway, it's a designation that hopefully is honoured by big companies like Monsanto, because in fact there's no legal way to stop them from stealing them. But at least the fact that they've been designated as open source and should be available to anyone and everyone to grow it and to save seeds and to share them and not to stop other people from making use of the seeds. It's quite an important designation. And so we were very proud to become part of that. And all the varieties in the Dwarf Tomato Project are pledged as open source seed initiative varieties. And so there's a pledge that we send out with seeds to say that they cannot be patented. That's the word I was looking for. They cannot be patented and they cannot be restricted from anybody. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Dwarf tomato breeding is now quite a global trend, and I wonder, as a tomato grower, how can a breeder become part of the Dwarf Tomato Project?
The project is now only operating in the Northern Hemisphere because I've finished breeding here in the Southern Hemisphere, and I was the only person breeding and looking after varieties here. So the Northern Hemisphere person to contact is Craig LaHollier, and I can give you his email address later on for anyone who might be interested to do some of the work that's involved. It takes quite a lot of volunteers to actually grow the various generations of these tomatoes until they are fully stabilised. So they have to be grown to about the 8th generation, 7th or 8th generation, and people that are involved with that aspect are really very much appreciated. So I'll give you some contact details later.
Thank you very much, Patrina, for the interview, for taking your time. It was definitely a great experience for me and for my viewers either. Hope to see you again, and in conclusion, I would like to ask you to say a few words for those who have decided to grow dwarf tomatoes.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to talk to you about the Dwarf Tomato Project. It's my pride and joy. I guess really what I would like to say to people is to try some of these plants and see for yourselves whether or not they are easy for you to grow, whether or not you really enjoy the flavours. And they're such a delightful, attractive plant that you can grow them amongst your flowers. You can grow them anywhere. They don't necessarily need to be stuck in a corner with the rest of the vegetables. They're beautiful plants. So just have a go, try some out and see what you think.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
What else I would like to say? As you have understood from the conversation, growing dwarf tomatoes is not difficult at all. And given their advantages and the diversity of varieties, I want to try as many of them as possible. Every year I grow about 40 different varieties of dwarf tomatoes, which I will definitely tell you about in my next videos. By the way, Patrina has a YouTube channel. There is only one video so far, but I will leave a link in the description, and your likes under her video will be the best thanks for the information she shared with us. How great is it, after all, that people have dedicated many years of their lives to hard work on a new direction of tomato breeding and are sharing their achievements with the world absolutely for free. Thanks for watching. I hope I helped you understand how to grow dwarf tomatoes today. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe and, of course, love tomatoes, grow tomatoes. This is the Lucky Garden channel, and see you soon.